Renewed US sanctions have forced a sharp decline in Iran's oil exports. But the strain of rising tensions between Tehran and Washington is spreading across the economy. Traders in neighboring Iraq, who've traditionally relied on Iranian products, say they're scaling back purchases.
Traders are hesitant to import goods from Iran because we don't know what will happen to its currency or whether their factories will stop production.
The Iranian rial has plunged 60% since Washington ditched the nuclear deal and slapped sanctions on Tehran. That sent prices of essential goods soaring. Government statistics show milk and egg prices are up 37% since the beginning of the year, while housing costs are up 20%. The World Bank forecasts Iran's economy will shrink 3.8% this year. Tehran wants European countries that were part of the 2015 nuclear accord to help it restore international trade to prop up the economy.
They must work towards normalizing economic ties with Iran and stop the economic terrorism and economic pressure against the Iranian nation. They cannot be part of the problem. They are duty-bound to normalize economic links between the Islamic Republic and the rest of the world.
But the shooting down of a US drone by Iran's military has further fueled tensions, and Washington's threatening to strike back.
Here's what Iran needs to get ready for: severe pain inside their country, that their capabilities pale in comparison to ours. We're not going to let them disrupt navigation of the seas, attack our allies and U.S. interests without paying a price. So if they're itching for a fight, they're going to get one.
That could mean more hardships for Iranians already burdened by skyrocketing inflation and food shortages. Mobin Nasir, TRT World.
Let's get more on this now with Ellen Wald in Jacksonville, Florida. She's the president of the energy consulting firm Transversal Consulting. Welcome back to Money Talks, Ellen. Now, as we know, the shooting down of this US spy drone happened near the Persian Gulf, which is home to around 55% of the world's proven oil reserves. The earlier attacks on two oil tankers happened near the Strait of Hormuz, which is the passageway for about a fifth of the world's oil supply. I'm wondering, what are these growing tensions having? What impact are they having on oil?
Well, it's very interesting because we really didn't see that much of an increase in oil prices when the tanker attacks happened, and also with the other tanker attacks that happened a month earlier. But what we are seeing now is that oil prices are elevated. WTI, the U.S. benchmark, is up about $7, which is a huge jump. It really had been quite low, around $51 a barrel. Now it's up above 57. And that's really both a reaction to this increased military threat in the Persian Gulf. I think really markets were waiting to see if there was going to be some kind of military interaction, and we're now much closer to that than we were before. But there is another aspect to consider, which is that markets got some very positive news at the exact same time, indicating that President Trump and President Xi of China will be speaking about trade negotiations at the G20, and that really did boost markets. So it's possible that some of the increase in oil prices is not due to the tensions in the Middle East, but is due to this new news on the trade front.
Yes, now, as we now know, the US President Donald Trump had actually approved several military strikes against Iran before calling them off just minutes before they were due to be launched. What impact is this very real prospect of a military conflict between the US and Iran having on energy markets? Are they pricing this in? Are they expecting one to break out?
I do think that there is an expectation that military conflict might break out, but the fact that the president did call back these strikes and then gave a rather lengthy explanation of why on Twitter does give markets some clarity about what to expect going forward. It's clear that the president does not want to endanger lives, and that really creates a very narrow space for maneuverability in terms of a response. And so I do think that that did calm markets somewhat. We did see prices retreat retreat ever so slightly after he gave that explanation, but it's a very tense situation. There's a lot going on in this region, both in terms of traffic by sea and also air traffic. And it is a very tense situation that markets are very concerned about.
Now, as you say, oil prices really did spike in the wake of this attack on the US spy drone near the Persian Gulf, but they're still a far cry from the $72 mark that oil prices reached just a little over a month ago, really. I mean, what's keeping prices depressed in spite of the recent rally?
Yeah, there's really two things keeping prices depressed. And the first is that there's a perception in the market that global economic activity is going to weaken, and particularly that that will affect oil demand. And the trade war with China is a big part of that. But also, we're seeing data coming out of China and other areas that indicate that oil demand is going to grow much less than was previously assumed. And that's really subsumed everything else in the oil market. This kind of tension in the Middle East would normally ratchet prices up much, much higher, but this dampening effect of the macroeconomic situation is really keeping prices lower. In fact, if you compare it to just last year, prices were much higher at this time.
Now, you obviously wrote the book Saudi Inc. Obviously, Saudi Arabia is Iran's arch enemy. What role do you think Saudi Arabia has in the way the US is reacting to these tensions at the moment?
Well, that's a very good question. And the Saudi-Iranian relationship is definitely a very tense one. But one of the important things to remember is that Iran plays a very important role for Saudi Arabia. They really, I think it's not really in Saudi interest to see Iran destroyed, or even regime change could be very, very risky from the Saudi perspective. They really do benefit from having Iran and picturing Iran as an aggressor. So I do think that there are a lot of factors in the Saudi establishment that are really pushing for a much greater response from the U.S. To Iran. To President Trump's credit, he really seems to not be affected by those voices, particularly from Saudi Arabia, that are calling for a lot more of a greater military response.
Okay, Ellen Wald, we'll have to leave it there, but we'll keep a close eye on these growing tensions. Thank you again for your time.